Welcome back to the Betting Pros College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Bogman, which you guys know, hearing my voice first means that Joe Pisapia is not with us on this show today. We will miss him, but to replace really myself, because I'm just switching duties over to the host role here, is one of my best friends in the industry, Nicholas Ian Allen, CFB Winning Edge owner and proprietor. Follow him on Twitter at CFB Winning Edge. I work with him. I've worked with him for 3 or 4 years at this point now. We have our own podcast, the CFB Winning Edge podcast, and he has a Patreon, patreon.com/CFB Winning Edge. Please check that out if you would. It has the best depth charts. It's so hard to find depth charts for college football here, but Nick does the work. And welcome to Betting Pros, Nick. How you doing, man?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So the way we structure it is I'm going to throw the nationally televised games at you, and you're going to tell me if you have them as a like or lean and who do you like in them. But before we go into the games, we always reflect back at the week that was, week 9. And these are the things that I put that we learned, really. Georgia remains in a class of their own. The CFP ratings are arguable for sure. A lot of controversy around them, but they feel right to me. I don't know if they feel right to you. Michigan State is legit. They beat Michigan, and Michigan changed stuff up. They really went after Michigan State, but Michigan State still got them late. FSU Clemson was an epic bad beat. I don't care what anyone says. I was super mad about getting that one wrong on my article here. And Penn State was 100% overlooking Illinois because they played Ohio State fairly hard. So what did you come away with from week 9, Nick?
Yeah, I agree with most everything you said. I mean, the college football playoff rankings would, argue. Everyone would argue, regardless of what happened, there'd be something imperfect with them, and there's plenty of time for them to figure themselves out. The only thing that I might push back a little bit on, I'm not 100% sure Michigan State is legit. In my power ratings, they're still 25th in the country. I know they're undefeated, huge win. They have made an incredible turnaround. I've been super impressed with Mel Tucker, the way he's remade that roster. Kenneth Walker does look like a Heisman front runner.
Yeah, he does.
But there's just a lot of things kind of around the edges that I'm not ready to buy in on Michigan State as a legitimate, Big Ten title contender, playoff contender. The schedule gets much tougher from here on out, starting with Michigan, and they were able to survive that. But they've got tough games against Ohio State, Penn State, Purdue's capable of knocking off anybody. Maryland's better than they've been in the past. So I think Michigan State, it's highly likely they lose at least twice from here on out. And they're a great story. Huge bounce back from a really, disappointing start to Tucker's tenure there last year. I'm really excited about the future, but even though they looked really good on Saturday and it was a huge win, I still have a lot of reservations about Michigan State as kind of being, the team that the committee put them there, where the pollsters have them, all of that. I'm not quite sure they're that good just yet.
That's fair. I just think that this was their first big test, and they passed it. I didn't expect them to beat Michigan.
I didn't either.
I was legit surprised to see that. And they did it in comeback fashion, too, and they did it their way with 5 Kenneth Walker touchdowns. So it was an impressive win, although I'm with you. Like, you have some bigger hills to climb than Michigan for this season. But as they beat the ones in front of them so far. Let's go to these games, Nick. And what we do here is we pick likes and leans. And normally we just do it where I'll just go through and pick the likes and then we'll talk about the leans. But we'll just go in order of appearance on television. And you can tell me if you think this game is a like or a lean. And the first one up is a Thursday night game. Georgia State at number 24, Louisiana. Louisiana is favored by 12. 53.5 is the over. Overwhelming money is on Louisiana so far right now. 81% are taking the over as far as tickets go. Louisiana, they win behind the rush, behind their rush offense, 23rd in the country, 19th in scoring defense too. Who do you like in this game?
So I would lean to Louisiana. My projections have the Raging Cajuns as a little less than a 15-point favorite. But that's my main set of power ratings projections. The others are a little all over the place. I have one that looks at talent only. That one has it closer to a touchdown. And then one that looks at just, stats, statistical performance, team performance. That one is more in line with the official model, which has it as over 2 touchdowns. So not, a huge lean one way or the other, not a big edge in any of those particular numbers. My rushing numbers actually give Louisiana a little bit more credit for their performance. I have them as a top 10 rushing offense and team performance. Both defenses, I think, are susceptible. So my projection is on the over. Again, not a huge lean one way or the other, but do see this as being a little more higher scoring than what the odds makers in the market have it as right now.
So you lean towards Louisiana?
I what is it like is the less
no lean is less like
right. Yeah, I guess I would lean Louisiana, but I don't love it. Usually would prefer to see a little bit more of a clear advantage, but I do think that they should be closer to a 2 touchdown favorite.
Yeah. I like Louisiana in this game. I would lean towards the over, but I don't know. 2 really good rushing offense tends to lend towards the under if they both get running. And you said their defense is suspect. So I think I'd lean towards the under.
The way Billy Napier seems to run his offense, if he gets a 2-score lead in the fourth quarter, they do slow it down and just try to get out of there with a win. So that's certainly something to consider as well.
All right, moving to the Saturday action, starting a half hour before all the other games. Army at Air Force. Air Force is a 2.5-point favorite. 37 is the over here behind the number 1 and number 2 rush offenses statistically. Air Force being number 1, Army being number 2. Both these teams run the triple option, so it lends towards the under, Nick. But the number is Air Force by 2.5. Who do you like here?
Yeah, I think the under Service Academy unders are in a lot of ways for a lot of people just kind of an automatic bet, no matter what the number
going
is.
Over because this number's so low. 37 is one of the lowest numbers of the season for sure.
Absolutely, and it's lower than it's been in years past. I mean, I think most years it opens in the low 40s. To have it open below 40 this year, obviously there's been reason to do that. People are catching on. I still think under 37 there's probably value there, just looking at past Air Force Army games, the way these two teams, these programs know each other really, really well. I know Army's defense and a lot of the measures that I look at, pretty ugly statistically, but a lot of that had to do with the game last week against Wake Forest. Completely different team, completely different style of offense. This is going to be very, very low scoring. I mean, I think it's going to be a 2017 type game. Wouldn't surprise me at all. 17-14. I think Air Force is the better team, but I think the margin of error is so slim that I don't have a firm, grasp one way or the other. Talent profiles are almost exactly the same. I think Air Force might have a couple of more explosive players, but Army's got a few as well. And regardless, big plays are going to be few and far between, I think. So I would lean the under. I know it is a really, really low number. In fact, my projections can't even get that low. So I'm officially on the over. But I just think that the under is the only play I would feel comfortable with this one.
It's funny that you mentioned that they can't get to 37 because I don't think they can get up to 75, which is the over on the next game here. Number 9, Wake Forest at UNC. North Carolina ranked or favored by 2.5. 75, like I said before, is the over here. Just 2 explosive offense. Wake Forest 5th in scoring so far this year, 22nd for UNC. Both great passing teams, suspect defense for North Carolina for sure, allowing over 30 points per game. What do you think of this game, Nick?
So I first have to say my numbers, I was a bit of an outlier in the preseason on North Carolina, and it scared it really scared me. I was worried about it. We spent a lot of time talking about it on the other show. But fortunately, it seems that we had North Carolina pegged pretty well. They were outside our top 25, and they basically haven't budged since then. They're 28th right now in my power ratings, and that feels about right. They are certainly an explosive offense. Sam Howell, one of the best quarterbacks in college football. Ty Chandler has been really good. Josh Downs has been one of the most exciting receivers in college football. The defensive numbers are not great. They rank 92nd in my defensive team performance ratings, but they have a much, much more talented roster, in most every talent metric that you would look at than Wake Forest. Wake Forest has been great. They are not a top 10 team in my estimation, but they have moved into the top 25 in my power ratings for a team at a talent profile, outside the top 40. They're 46th in my roster strength projections and 51st defensively, which doesn't, set up well for a game against such a high-powered North Carolina offense. But they've played incredibly well. They've played, top 4 in my offensive team performance numbers. But I do just think that this is a game that North Carolina probably should win. The projection is a little closer than I'd like. I'm actually officially on Wake Forest to cover, but I wish I was on North Carolina, quite honestly. I think this is a game that they win by maybe a touchdown or more. I just think that they are the more talented team, and I think they're in a good position here to knock off Wake Forest.
This is a great test for Wake Forest here, and I do think they're going to turn into a pumpkin. Not sure if it's this week, though, just because North Carolina's defense has played so poorly. So I think I'd lean towards Wake Forest a little bit in this game, but I definitely like the under 75. I think that number is just too big. Look, North Carolina 5-3 playing to the over, 3-5 for Wake Forest playing to the over. So they are dead even, 8-8 combined. Now, this next game is our biggest spread of nationally televised games this week. It's Georgia, a 38-point favorite. 59 is the over at home against Missouri. Now, Missouri is 0-8 against the spread this year. It's been a bad year for Missouri, to say the least here. Georgia, number 1 defense, obviously, number 1 in scoring, allowing less than a touchdown a game, 6.6 or just over a touchdown, I guess. Second in passing yards against, second in rush yards against. Their offense is pretty decent too, 14th in scoring. Missouri has offense. They have no defense. This looks like an easy Georgia in the over to me. What do you think of it?
So I think Georgia has been absolutely incredible this year. Defensively, it's one of the best we've seen in this current era. I mean, the last decade or so, they're right on track with, Alabama at the very beginning of the decade, as statistically, in a lot of the ways that I look at things, among the best that we've seen during this period. I mean, they're number 1 in yards per play allowed, adjusted for garbage time and FBS opponents only. Number 1 in points per drive, 0.32 points per drive in those situations. It's just incredible. Yards per pass, 5.1 against FBS opponents. EPA per play, expected points added. They are number 1 in the country. They're number 2 in success rate, but that's the only non-number 1 in the big 5 statistical categories that I pay closest attention to. They've been incredible on defense, and they've been solid on offense. I am not a huge believer that Stetson Bennett is the quarterback you want if you're trying to win a national championship, but he's been good, and his running ability has added something a little different that they've needed at times on offense, especially with the receiving unit being as banged up as it's been all year. Missouri is, you mentioned the defensive numbers. They're 121st in my defensive team performance numbers, 125th against the run. We know Georgia can run it. Yeah, they've got a deep and talented running back group. Missouri has some talent. Tyler Beatty's been coming off a huge game
he's a great
last
player.
Week, but he's had a really good year. Missouri's also missing potentially their starting quarterback, Connor Bazelak, who started the season really well, kind of slowed down a little bit in recent weeks, but he got banged up in their game against Vanderbilt last week. It's questionable as to whether or not he will play. They've had injuries at receiver. They've had injuries on the defensive line. but I just think 38 points is too too many, quite honestly. All three of my projections fall well within that. I've got Georgia favored by less than 35, which is, getting close, but the talent numbers, it's much closer. And
so the first game Missouri covers is against Georgia, Nick?
I think so. I think too.
That's
I think
a huge number.
Points,
That's
I think
enormous.
it's just too many points.
Okay.
And I'm not certain that Missouri's going to be able to do any better offensively than other opponents Georgia has faced this year. But I just don't know that they're going to be able to score quite enough. I mean, 45-10 sounds about right to me. Our projection is 44-10. That I think is within the realm of possibility. I think 38 is just too much. I think Missouri finds a way to cover.
It's a lot of points. It is a lot of points. Let's go over to Navy at Notre Dame. Notre Dame, a 20.5 point favorite here, ranked number 10. 47.5 is the over. Look, Navy's been covering recently, and they're 5-3 against the spread, as is Notre Dame. 3-5 playing to overs for Navy, 5-3. So another 8-8 mix here, which the flat out numbers don't help us. Seems like Notre Dame is the much more talented team, but Navy has been impressive over the last month, I would say, and they've been covering. So what do you think of this game, Nick?
Yeah, this is similar to the Georgia-Missouri game in the way that my projections see it. Notre Dame is a heavy favorite in all three models, projected to cover in all three models, but I have far less confidence in this one because Navy is just so unique, so difficult in a lot of ways to model, especially mine, that talent metrics, talent numbers are the first ingredient and the biggest piece of the puzzle for me, and Navy just doesn't have that. They're one of the least talented rosters in the country on paper, but they do a great job of neutralizing those talent disadvantages because of the style of football they played, and they've gotten better and better at that over the course of the year. Early on, Navy was bad, but they've improved a lot over the course of the season. And this is a game that Notre Dame probably should win by more than 3 touchdowns. It's just whether or not Navy can bend Notre Dame, to play their style of football. If they can steal a possession, if they can limit Notre Dame's possessions,
which they've been doing,
drives,
but against Notre Dame is a tough task. Yeah,
it is. And the last time these two teams played, Notre Dame, blew them out. So it's certainly, they know Navy pretty well, even though they didn't play them last year, play them every other year. So I think that there's a chance that Notre Dame gets there, but I don't have a whole lot of confidence in it. I think it's more likely that, Navy plays well, loses by 17, something in that range. But on paper, Notre Dame should win by, well over 3 touchdowns, I would say.
I think so too. I think this is, I think my favorite play is the under of that game, just because that is how good Navy's defense has been. And if it lends towards them at all, I think the under is the safest thing. So that's what, and if you're going to go the under, you probably take Navy too. So I guess I'm on Navy as well. Just talked myself straight through that one. Oklahoma, ranked number 11, are 3-point road favorites at West Virginia. The over's 49 here. Both these teams great against the spread, 6-2 for OK State, 5-3 for West Virginia, but they both play way more towards the under. Combined, they'd be 5-10-1 playing towards unders this season. To me, Nick, this feels like, I don't know, Oklahoma State probably wins, but I love the under in this game just because these two teams play pretty solid defense. What do you think of this one?
Yeah, I think I would tend to agree. Oklahoma State is in a lot of ways similar to Michigan State, similar to Iowa. And, we've seen Iowa kind of get exposed a little bit. And that happened, to Oklahoma State. They lost a couple of weeks ago. But they're certainly capable of beating any team on the schedule, traveling as far as they have to travel to West Virginia, which is not an easy place to play in itself. is, a little bit tricky being a road favorite, even, just 3 points. I don't feel great about it. My projections don't have a big edge in any of the numbers we look at. In fact, West Virginia has the biggest edge is for West Virginia as far as talent goes, just because, the way I calculate things, experience, career production, things like that, it just sort of adds up, a few more points in West Virginia's categories. The other, two models see Oklahoma State winning and covering, but not by a very big margin. So I don't have a strong opinion on this game. I kind of wish our projection was on West Virginia as a home underdog, but 3 points is, not too difficult if Oklahoma State can find a way to win. Probably going to cover the 3. So my projection has them winning by 5. Not a ton of confidence in that. I do think Oklahoma State is the better team, but it's a pretty difficult situation, a really long road trip and a tough place to play, and a decent West Virginia team that is coming off a big win over Iowa State last week.
And I think to get to West Virginia, you have to fly into Pittsburgh, then drive into West Virginia, go through the mountains, and get
There's
to
no easy way to get there.
Yeah, it's
especially
just
from Oklahoma.
It's really hard to travel to West Virginia for that reason. So that's why West Virginia has such great home field advantage. Number 3, Michigan State, a 3-point road favorite at Purdue. 54 is the over here. Look, Michigan State, one of the best teams. We both said earlier in the show, we think they're going to turn into a pumpkin eventually. I don't think it's to Purdue, but Purdue, they are some big game hunters. So, and they're having a great year. So what do we think of this game, Nick?
Yeah, I was really, really hoping when this line was first posted that it was going to be, 6, maybe even 7.
So you could go, it's easy Purdue. I'm not going to get the touchdown. Right.
It was totally wishful thinking on my part because there's, 3 is the right number. I have Michigan State favored by a little over 3.5. The talent number is very, very similar, but actually the stats model, because it uses the last 3 years of weighted results, Purdue is actually favored to win that one outright by about a touchdown. So if I had to choose one side or the other, I would rather be on Purdue, quite honestly, to cover at home, maybe even win outright, even though my projections give just, percentage points in favor of Michigan State winning and covering. I just don't, like I said at the beginning of the show, I think that Michigan State is going to lose a couple of times before the end of the season. This is a spot, Purdue, like you mentioned, has some success in these spots, could be it. Especially coming off of, people I'm sure are patting Michigan State players on the back all week on campus after the big win, number 3 in the, playoff rankings. It sets up for a bit of a letdown spot, hangover effect, trap game, whatever you want to call it. So I wish I was on Purdue here.
Yeah. I mean, I understand wanting to be on Purdue, but I'm taking Michigan State here. They're on a roll, and I don't think they're a team that is going to overlook Purdue because I think they've been overlooked in the past, right? And I think Tucker has these guys concentrated and focused, and I'm excited about them. Tougher games later in the season, but I think they can beat Purdue. Baylor, number 12 ranked Baylor, 6.5-point road favorite at TCU. 58.5 is the over here. This is my favorite nationally televised game of the week to pick. I think this is Baylor in a drubbing against TCU. TCU won 6-1 against the spread this year. Patterson, their head coach, just left. There's a lot of talent in TCU, but I just think that the way that Baylor is playing right now, they seem like one of the better teams in the country. 16th ranked offense in scoring, 21st ranked defense in scoring. One of the better teams in the Big 12 here, Nick. I like them going away in this one.
So I can repeat a lot of the same things I said about Michigan State. Not that I think Baylor is super overrated or anything, but I have a ton of respect for Dave Aranda, their head coach. Have a ton of respect for the job that he's done turning around what was a really, really tough year one and making this a much, much better team. Didn't have to remake the roster quite like Tucker did at Michigan State, was actually able to elevate a lot of the pieces that were there. TCU, I agree with you that on paper, Baylor looks like the better team, especially right now, the way that they've been playing, the way TCU's defense is just cratered this year. The one just sort of outlying factor and something that I, can't model, I'm not sure anyone out there can, TCU just let go Gary Patterson. Been there 21 years, and it's always a little bit tricky to figure out how a team is going to respond to that.
Yeah.
This year, we've seen Georgia Southern bounce back after its coach got fired in a big way. USC the next week bounced back in a big way. There one just escaped my mind. I had it there and lost it. But we've seen teams treat this, and sometimes it's only for just 1 week, but hey, let's go out, put our best performance together and win one, for the guy that we just lost. But, that's just not something you can always count on. So I think TCU will play well. Some of its best players have really been banged up. Quarterback Max Duggan, Zach Evans, 5-star running back, Quentin Johnston, future NFL receiver. The defense has been bad. And so, my projections are on Baylor here by roughly the same amount that the odds makers are. The other two models, the talent model and the stats model, actually lean toward TCU winning outright. So I think that there certainly is, that is a possibility. I think it'll be a close game. I think TCU will play inspired, but we are on Baylor by just a very small margin there.
I was going to say, it sounds like, this is my favorite game, and it's Nick's least favorite game of the week.
Yes.
Because
that's one of them. Yep.
The potential to bounce back. This one's my least favorite here because I don't. Number 13 versus number 14, Auburn at Texas A&M. Texas A&M, a 4.5-point home favorite, 49.5. I think these numbers are so good, Nick. I think you give a slight favor to the home team here. I think that number is about perfect. So this is a runaway game for me. What do you think?
So I actually kind of like this one.
Okay.
My numbers line up on Texas A&M to win and cover. 4.5 is a little bit tricky. I will admit that my power ratings probably are a little too high on Texas A&M. They're number 7 in my power ratings, and they haven't quite lived up to that level of play on the field, especially offensively. The way I do things respects a lot of Texas A&M's offensive talent, guys like Isaiah Spiller, Devin Achane, Jaden Weidemeyer, and Naya Smith, but they just haven't been, explosive or super consistent offensively. They rank 61st in offensive team performance. The defense has been great, and Auburn is, not as good on the road. Bo Nix historically has not been as good on the road as he's been at home, even though he's played really, really well recently. Auburn is solid, but not spectacular on both sides of the ball. 30th in offensive team performance, 21st on defense, top 10 overall. So these teams are pretty evenly matched. But the numbers fall and give a little bit of cushion to Texas A&M on all three. And I also have seen, just some other smart people I follow in the space who look at things analytically like I do, see a little value on Texas A&M as well. So Of the ones we've talked about, I've got most confidence maybe on this one. I think Texas A&M wins by a touchdown or more. Not a huge edge or margin of error, but I do feel a little bit better about this one than some of the ones we talked about.
Hard for me to give A&M credit. I mean, everyone knows that as a Texas fan. By the way, Texas not on national TV. That's how bad they've been. So they're on FS1 this week. LSU at number 2, Alabama. I couldn't believe this line, 28.5 in favor of Bama. They are at home. 66 is the over. I think, gun to my head, I pick Bama here. But I hate this giant number against LSU. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I think it's just too big of a number. And LSU is super unpredictable. Another situation where the coach has been fired. You don't know if they're going to mail it in, have had a ton of injuries. But they've also shown the ability to bounce back. I mean, knocked off Florida earlier this year, came back, and played hard at the end against Ole Miss when that game had been decided. So it doesn't seem like LSU has quit on Ed Orgeron, but I just, talent-wise or what's available because of injuries right now is just not able to compete with Alabama. So this is a game that Alabama should win comfortably. But 28.5 again is just a lot of points in a game where
line.
you're playing a team that's got a lot of blue chip talent like LSU. So all three of my projections keep it within the 28.5. Officially, my projected point spread is 24.8. That can go a lot of ways with a special team score, defensive, big play on defense, short field, what have you. So not a huge edge there, but the other two models have it within 3 touchdowns. So feel a little bit better about that. There's obviously plenty of opportunity for Alabama to blow them out, but I think LSU is going to keep it respectable or at least be able to cover here.
Yeah, it's going to be it. I mean, that's always a classic matchup, but 28.5, I just didn't think I'd see that number. Number 4, Oregon is a 7-point road favorite at Washington. 51's the over here. Oregon, terrible against the spread this year, 2-6, but this feels like a number that they can cover. Washington has been bad, particularly on offense, 104th in scoring, 72nd in passing, 100th in rushing. They just can't put it together. Great defensively, 17th, first against the pass, and 97th against the rush. But, I mean, I don't know. This feels like an Oregon drubbing because Washington just doesn't seem to have it on offense, particularly this year.
Yeah, and in my projections, Washington's probably the team that we've been the most wrong about from a full season perspective. So keeping that in mind, we do project Washington to cover here. I mean, it's a rivalry game. It's in Seattle. Washington still does play good defense, and especially against the pass. And Oregon, as you mentioned, just hasn't quite been as impressive as you might expect given their rankings, given the win over Ohio State. So I think it'll be close. I see multiple paths to Washington covering, but I do agree that Washington's been incredibly disappointing this year, and so it's really difficult to trust them. But I would lean toward Washington losing close here, and Oregon just maybe not quite being able to pull away.
I'm gonna go opposite with you. I think that it's a good rushing team versus Washington's good against the pass. They're not so great against the run. Sure. I just think that's the matchup to watch for in this game. So I like Oregon going away. Indiana at number 7, Michigan, a 20-point favorite here for Michigan. 50.5 is the over. Indiana miserable against the spread this year, 2-6. Michigan is 6-2. This seems like a good team versus a beat up team that has not been so great, Nick. Looks like an easy Michigan win here.
Yeah, it does. And I see, literally no edge. My projection is Michigan to win by 20. Indiana's playing likely a third stringer at quarterback for the second straight week. Stephen Carr at running back has bounced back, had a solid game last week. But Michigan is much better against the run than Maryland was. Maryland's triple digits in rushing team performance on defense. Michigan's top 15. So don't think that Indiana's really going to be able to move the ball. I think Michigan is, obviously going to be super motivated, wanting to come back, make a statement after losing last week. Don't know that I trust them to cover 3 touchdowns in a, conference game, but 20 seems like the right number, and it's what my model projects.
And the last game we have up here, USC at Arizona State. Arizona State's an 8.5-point favorite. This line just confuses me. Both these teams terrible against the spread, though. 3-5 for USC, 3-5 for ASU. They're 8-8 combined, playing to over-unders. This is a bit of a runaway game for me because I just don't know which Arizona State team is going to come out. USC keeps flipping back and forth between their quarterbacks. I think USC is probably the more talented team here, but ASU has been playing better overall. So I think I would lean towards ASU, but I don't like this game at all. What do you think here, Nick?
I agree. I can't trust either team. Both have been disappointing compared to where I projected them preseason. Arizona State especially. On the flip side of how we kind of got North Carolina right, Arizona State was one we were a little too high on compared to a lot of other folks out there, and they've really disappointed, especially the last 2 games. And I can't really trust either team right now. You said, don't know which one's going to show up. I think I actually might like the under in
That's
this
a good
one.
call.
If I were to pick one side, or have to make a play on this one, I think I would lean toward the under. 8.5 seems like a lot of points, but I can't really trust USC to put together a full game. So I agree with you. I'd probably stay away with it on that side, but I think I like the under, if anything.
Well, those are all the nationally televised games. So good luck in all your bets. I want to thank Nick again for stopping by with us. Please check out him on Twitter at CFB Winning Edge and his Patreon, patreon.com/CFB Winning Edge. If you are looking for that, I'm telling you, best depth charts you have seen anywhere on the internet. He does injury reports. It's one of the first stops I make when I'm looking at all my stuff for the week and writing my article for bettingpros.com. And please check out Betting Pros, of course, bringing you this podcast right now. There is a wealth of information over there. You can click on a matchup. You can see the number at every single book. There's articles by all the great writers. There's this video. There's news updates. There's all kinds of great stuff over at Betting Pros for every sport, not just college football. It is an aggregator for everything betting. So please check it out if you guys would. Joe will be back next week, so we will see you guys then. Good luck, and we will see you guys next week. Take it easy, everybody.